CCC spokesperson Promise Mkwananzi joins us to give the party's reaction to the story. Promise, Zimbabwe's recent abolition of the death penalty, some say it is a historic step. What does this change signify, especially for Zimbabwe in terms of human rights, justice, but also its global standing?
Well, it's an important development, a very welcome development. As you know, that in the opposition, we've always advocated for the right and the security of life as a fundamental principle of the party and the position of the party that we have taken. And we have supported the abolition of the death penalty over the years. So it is indeed a welcome development in the country. I think the sanctity of life must take precedence over any other consideration.
So as the opposition, how does the CCC then view President Mnangagwa's personal experience with the death penalty? How does this influence his stance? Do you believe this is part of a wider shift in Zimbabwe's human rights policies?
Well, one hopes that it may be that, because you know that the death penalty hung for a long time over the head of our former leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, when he was falsely accused of treason. And we did see the use or the threat to use the death penalty against opposition leaders. And I hope that this has come to an end. But not only that, we have also seen the use of killings to silence political opponents in the streets for political ends. And I hope that we want to urge the government, want to urge every other player that the sanctity of life must take precedence over political interests. The shootings that we saw some years ago, which have not been accounted for, and all those things, it becomes meaningless if we just put away the death sentence in the courts, but fail to put away the death sentence in the political sphere.
It's safe to say, Promise, that the death penalty has long been a contentious issue in that country. Why do you think President Mnangagwa's government decided to act now, especially after so many years without executions?
Well, it has always been. I think there's one of the rare issues where there has been consensus across the political board that the death sentence must be abolished. It is actually an indictment on Mr. Mnangagwa that it has taken so long. Nevertheless, we do welcome the abolition of the death sentence, and you know that it is the opposition that actually sponsored the bill, the private bill in Parliament. So we are indeed in total support of the abolition of this particular penalty.
As we continue to track reactions, Amnesty International has also called this decision a beacon of hope for the abolition movement in Africa. What do you think this could mean for other African nations that still retain the death penalty?
Well, I think it's motivation and a lesson to them that this is an inhumane and degrading treatment of whatever offense one may have committed. And we must be seen to be in the lead on the African continent in terms of the respect of the sanctity of life and promoting more rights-based measures, corrective and punitive measures against whatever offenses may be committed by whoever that would have committed them other than the death penalty.
But also interesting is that while this is a positive step, Amnesty has also raised concerns about a clause that could reinstate the death penalty during even a state of emergency. What's your view on this provision, and how should the government address these concerns?
Well, it speaks to the tradition of the ruling party to use the law to silence or to intimidate political opponents. If you are abolishing the death penalty, it must be abolished in total. It cannot be abolished and re-established as and when Mr. Mnangagwa feels that it must be. Whenever there is a state of emergency, there must be other means and measures that can be taken other than the option of killing.
So although execution stopped in 2005, there were still people on the death row. What do you think will happen, especially to those individuals now? And how do you foresee the re-sentencing process even unfolding?
Well, I know that they've said that there will be re-sentencing I've been in prison myself with some of the people who had been on death row that had been, those sentences had already been reduced before the abolition of the death penalty to life imprisonment. So one would anticipate that the ultimate penalty in Zimbabwe will now be life sentence.
Let's explore another layer. Zimbabwe's decision to abolish the death penalty, it does mark a shift from colonial era practices. How do you think this reflects the broader efforts to move away from Zimbabwe's colonial legacy?
Well, it's just, let's not be misled into believing that there are or there is a wholesale process of reforms away from the colonial practices or the colonial institutions of oppressions. There is not. This is indeed a very welcome development, but broadly looking at our lawmaking process, you realize that we have hardly moved from the very colonial laws that oppressed our people before independence. We have just changed the semantics, we have changed the wording and a few things here and there, but broadly speaking, our legislative framework remains in all intents similar or even the same as the one that was being used by Ian Smith and others. And Mr. Mnangagwa and Mr. Mugabe before him have relied on the same laws to persecute and suppress the views of the generality of the people of our country.
As we begin winding down our conversation, Promise, I want to get some of your personal reflections. As the CCC spokesperson, how does your party even view this abolition of the death penalty, or give us your personal view? You've spoken about your experiences in Zimbabwe's prison as well, and some of your engagements with prisoners who are on death row.
Well, I know for sure that in the prisons, it's a very, very welcome development. There had been the prisoners themselves, in particular those that were under the hammer, so to speak, had been anticipating that it will be abolished. And I did speak with some who had already been pardoned, so to speak, from the death penalty, and they were very, very, grateful and very, very radical in saying this must be abolished for whatever circumstances that may come up. There must be other means to punish people other than, executing them. And this is a view that, as I said earlier on, is broadly shared in our party, in our movement, in the democratic movement in Zimbabwe, as well as the view that is shared by the leader of the opposition, Advocate Nelson Chamisa.
Thank you so much for your time, Promise, and sharing your perspective on this landmark decision in Zimbabwe.